Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, soon to be a part of the Roku TV network. Actually, it already is a part of the TV network. And I greet you today on this show, World Edition, live from the Queen City of Charlotte in North Carolina, as I'm attending the Outlook for Tech conference here in March 2022. On this show, we talk about technology, innovation, and what we can do to move forward in a post pandemic world, if there ever is one. Before I begin my quick update on Russia, and I'll be here for a few minutes as I have to get back to work here at this conference, is my day started very differently this morning. Normally, I drop my son off to school, swim a mile, come, get ready, and get ready for the 10 o'clock show. And then I go back to work, and I'm at home pretty much all day. If every now and then I go to Thursdays to the office that we have for my job. But today I drove at 6 in the morning to Charlotte with a colleague. We got to the conference and it was amazing. Within minutes, the energy of seeing other people as I started my day gave me an energy that not even 3 strong cups of coffee would give me. This was my first post-COVID event really attending in person. And I got to tell you, I felt unbelievably good. It got me thinking of whether we should start looking seriously at moving back to in-person events, or at least hybrid events, and whether we should, at least to the best of our ability, with safety precautions in place, of course, do our best to return ourselves to some sense of normalcy. At the end of the day, as Chris Greco said in a conversation before this show, one of our esteemed panelists, we are social creatures. We learn and inspire and feed off each other's energy. And I think that can help us get through this together. I look forward to a day today where we're talking about cybersecurity, the future of the job market and technology here at the campus of UNC Charlotte. And we can also talk about the new job creation of the future. Many of my tech industries from around the state of North Carolina are here today, and I look forward to bringing some of them on guests on Roku TV's World Edition to talk about innovation and technology. Now let's get started. Briefly, before I bring on the panelists, the situation in Russia continues. They've taken over a nuclear power plant in Ukraine. They're fighting hard to take the east and south of Ukraine, as well as fighting hard to block entrance through the Black Sea. 1 million people have already fled Ukraine, and the Russian military is fiercely looking at leading one of the largest humanitarian disasters, focusing now on bombing civilian areas and residential areas, with the hope of having them flee the cities, and attacks to take over Kyiv are still underway, and Kharkiv is being bombed. As sanctions continue and the economy in Russia worsens, Putin, as recently as yesterday in a 90-minute call with Prime Minister Macron, said that he will not back down. He will continue to fight to the end. Now, Russia is not winning this war quickly. The Ukrainians, to their credit, have been defending their air skies brilliantly. We don't know how much that will last, whether they will be granted membership in the European Union. But at the end of the day, they are fighting hard. And Russia, if this war is drawn out, could be in a conflict that goes beyond a year, maybe even longer than that. How long will the Russian people and the Russian economy be able to withstand this war? Or will this war be something that brings China and Russia even closer together? Would it result in sanctions that brought Europe into recession and would lead to higher gas prices here or wherever we are in the world? Only time will tell. But one thing is perfectly clear. The Russia and Ukraine are at war, a war that Vladimir Putin says will not end anytime soon. Let's get started. Today we have with us Mark Lee, Chris Greco.
Glad to be here along with Chris Greco. And of course, I think Nick may be joining us as well. I was enjoying your comments about being out and about and being there in the Queen City. I actually need to visit the Queen City myself as I've got relatives down there and everything. But that being said, I was going to say I went to an in-person event this past Sunday as well. And you're right, it does give you a different kind of energy because there was a film festival that dealt with horror and suspense and things along those lines. It was this past next weekend, and I did attend that on Sunday. And you're absolutely right; it does give you a lot more energy being able to talk to folks and chit chat with them and all of that. As Chris said, we are definitely social beings and all along those lines. So that is a very true statement and everything. One thing that I was curious to ask Chris about on a military standpoint, and you actually brought it up when you brought up the Ukraine, is that whole situation with the nuclear power plant, because as I was hearing that, it definitely put me in mind of Chernobyl, and it definitely put me in mind of a lot of other disasters in that space. It was a nuclear power plant, not a nuclear missile explosion, but those kind of things can have impacts on the environment and impact on us for decades and centuries to come. So it doesn't sound like, I don't know that it has exploded yet, but it could possibly be heading that way. But I was just wondering, from a military standpoint and an environmental standpoint, what your thoughts would be, and maybe even if Nick has some thoughts on that as well, as he says that we might be getting ready to just destroy the world anyway.
So I have a personal note on that. I was actually stationed in Germany, West Germany, at that time when Chernobyl basically exploded, whatever you want to call it. My wife was pregnant at the time, and I remember that the West Germans were very concerned about the fallout. It turned out that the fallout from that implosion, the winds took it west. So basically, it came right over Germany, and we had a garden. We were on base at Ramstein Air Base, and we had a garden. And they said, just destroy everything in the garden. Do not eat it. Throw it away. Don't eat anything out of the garden, because basically the radioactivity was enough. And I told my wife, I said, stay indoors. Just stay indoors until the level is such that we can go outside. I had to go to work. I basically walked to work at Ramstein Air Base because I was right near the headquarters. So I mean, I was, but yeah, we felt that, and that was just the point. The point being is that Chernobyl did not have containment towers. It didn't, those steam towers that you see, in North Carolina, the ones that bust out all that steam. There was no containment towers at Chernobyl. None. When that thing overheated and that went up, there was no containment whatsoever of radiation. That just spread everywhere, to the water, to the air, everything that you can think of. Now, I don't know whether these things began with a Z, the one they just took, has containment towers or not. I didn't see it in the photos, but I'd have thought that the Ukrainians would be a little bit smarter about that stuff and put up containment towers now so that you don't have a problem. But does nuclear power present an issue? Yeah, spent uranium. Where do you put the spent uranium? Where do you put it? Where do you bury it? Can you bury it deep enough? We put it in limestone mines, but basically, what do you do with it? So yeah, that's a definite problem.
I want to wish everyone a very wonderful weekend. And I just want to tell my team, I'm so grateful to be a part of this network. And please have a great discussion today about the Ukraine. And as I wanted to sum up for our audience, the situation continues to worsen. And so we pray for the people of Ukraine. And we'll be talking about PBS Carolina today at 4 o'clock. And we're going to have a discussion next week, guys, on COVID, getting back to normal and, getting ourselves back to more in-person events, but realizing that there are 2,400 dying a day of COVID. So we'll have those discussions. Thank you all so much. Mark Lee, the floor is yours, and I'll go do my job.
No problem. Glad that you were able to do the opening and all of that. Yeah. And I know that you're going to be trying to recruit us some people out of that tech space to definitely come on and share their thoughts and all along those lines. As a matter of fact, one of the things in terms of the news that was out there, and I do want to get to the Ukraine as well, is something that I know that Steve has been interested in the past, but I'd love to hear Nick's thoughts about it and others as well, which is high-speed rail the future of U.S. transportation? Because there's definitely some talk around that, and definitely something that Biden has been talking about. We know that here in the Carolinas, when they tried to get it, it was actually kind of defeated by a major university, that being the one around the corner from me, Duke University, and there were some other players as well. But definitely, he's calling for the second greatest railroad revolution and has championed high-speed rail projects while serving as a vice president. And his pick for transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, has said that he wants the U.S. to be leading the world in high-speed rail. So what are your thoughts? Are we going to have high-speed rail, or should we even be thinking about high-speed rail? Anybody?
Yeah. Okay. So high speed rail, basically, what does it use? If it uses magnetic resonance or
Maglev.
whatever else, if high speed rail uses energy, what type of energy do we have to be able to make that within the climate change arena? Can we do high speed rail, and can we accommodate the climate change accords at the same time? There are going to be things that we're going to have to sit back and say, do we want the climate change accords, or do we want this? And we're going to have to make a decision on that and figure out which way we're going to go.
Well, I forgot to mention one important thing. On Tuesday at 10 a.m., we're going to be having the head of SiriusXM show, The Urban View, actually inside the issues, with Dr. Wilmer Leon, who's a political scientist. So, Mark, I'll be sending you his information.
You don't have to. He was on the show yesterday. He was on another show yesterday, so I know exactly who Wilmer is.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Wilmer Leon will be on World Edition and we'll be talking about the entire show will be on Ukraine, Russia, democracy. And he likes to shake things up. So you better come on with your toes on, because he likes to throw some surprises, especially live on the TV. So it's great to see you, Sasha Starr. And we look forward to hearing Sasha's analysis of the continued war in Russia. I'll see you Monday. Thank you.
Yeah, it ought to be interesting with Sasha and William on the same show, because he was actually on LA Bachelor's show yesterday, and he actually brought up some questions around Putin's motivation and things around that nature, because in his theory, part of it is that Putin is being surrounded by Western forces, including Turkey and other things. But like I said, I'm not going to say the words of the man. I'll let the man speak for himself on Tuesday, as Steve just said. But I'm sure that him and Sasha may have some disagreements. I'll just put it that
maybe
way.
we'll get some update what's going on in Ukraine from Sasha, because you get the Russian news to the extent you can get Russian news, because I heard they shut down some of the independent news sources in Russia, and Russian Times got thrown out. But you can get it on a place called Rumble, Mark. We don't broadcast into Rumble. We should do it, because I'm right now, as we're talking, I'm fighting Facebook again to make sure the program gets on, and LinkedIn again to make sure this gets through. In the meantime, Vimeo we had a big spike up in viewers on Vimeo. I don't even know how they find us on Vimeo, but
It's probably through Roku.
Is it really? Okay. Well, I don't know. All I'm saying is there was a big spike up. It was over 5,000 people on Roku, on Vimeo. But Facebook, man, they just threw me off again. And it's like a constant battle. So anyway, in the meantime, let's hear what Sasha about Russia.
First of all, before I forget, I would like to comment on the high-speed railway. The idea of America will be a leader in that. America can be a leader in feasibility studies. There are several systems available, and each one deserves to be looked at. And feasibility study has to be
That's right. That's what they'll
and
do.
then somebody has to comment on feasibility study, and somebody has to redo feasibility study. That's what, because how you can become a leader in something that has been used around the world since well over 30 years. Because I remember the first time I used a TGV in France was in 1992. So it's 30 years ago. Was it France and many other countries like China and Japan and just, even Germany has. Come on, it's a laughable stuff. But feasibility study, America is very good at it. So let's get busy with feasibility study, and good luck, and somebody will make a lot of money. Also, probably it's not even a time to be worried about climate change and high speed railway. The nuclear war is getting closer and closer. In fact, now, for the first time, I believe there are more than 50% chance that we will head into nuclear war, in a serious nuclear exchange. Why is it happened? Of course, I will talk about it on the other program. program at 1 until 11 o'clock. But all I wanted to say is that Putin, he is not just a madman. He is indoctrinated. Essentially, you can compare it in some ways to Ayatollah. He has certain beliefs that he, regardless of what you will talk to him and explain to him, Macron can call him 45 times a day. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The mind of a man is sealed. He is not gonna listen to anything, and because he cannot win and will not win the war in Ukraine, then how he can further communicate with the West. Furthermore, I will also tell on my program, there is a question, a huge question: is West doing enough to help Ukrainians? Let me tell you something. What they've done with sanctions, it's more than a nuclear bomb to be exploded. It's much more, because nuclear bomb, okay, it will maim and kill some number of people or so on, which is horrible. But those who survived, okay, they survived, life goes on. Now, when Russia lost its foreign reserves, it means a nuclear bomb which kills all of a sudden all country, not just the territory where it was exploded, but all country. You can't even imagine what's happened in Russia, and that's why Putin will escalate the war farther and farther, and it will come to a point that people will start turning against him, not just outside of Russia, but even inside of Russia. And that's where the war will start, because he will have nothing to lose anymore. And because Russia is ruled by a madman, the madman will, and unless the people in the command will refuse to obey his orders. And that's also the gamble there is one.
Well, actually, that's interesting you said that, Sasha, because one of the things I heard in one of those social media rooms that I frequented and everything was the whole question of whether anybody would have the nerve or even be brave enough with the kind of government that Russia has to take him out from within. So I was just wondering what your thoughts about are that, because like I said, there was different folks. There were some folks that were like, nope, never happened, can't happen, will never happen. And there were others that felt that it will probably happen within the next several months.
That's the only possibility that would keep West and USA at bay and not preventing war against Russia. There is a possibility that he will be taken away. Yes.
So let's go through your argument, Sasha. So Sasha, you said there's about a 50% chance that it'd be a nuclear exchange somewhere, somewhere maybe down the road. But then you say that Putin will be deposed somewhere along the line, or the people in the military will refuse his orders. That's where I'm getting to. There's zero chance of a nuclear exchange. And I'll tell you why, is because when reasonable people, not Putin, but the people below him that have been in this military, not the Soviet military, but actually have been brought up in Russian military, I think they're going to sit back and they're going to say, wait a minute, this guy wants to put a nuclear bomb into Western areas or whatever else. All of a sudden now, it doesn't seem to me. I think that's going to be the drawing line. If Putin says time to press the button, they're going to sit there and say, nah, we're not pressing the button. This is something. And the problem is that the Duma is four square behind Putin. So there's going to be it's going to be an interesting military coup that happens, and you're going to see probably tanks putting shells into the Duma like they did when they put shells into the parliament back when I think it was Yeltsin or whoever it was that started to get pissed off at the parliament. So I think it's going to be an interesting way this whole thing plays out from the standpoint of Russia. They're either going to go four square behind this guy, in which case there's going to be issues, or he's going to be either dead or deposed. I'm telling you, that's the only way to stop this thing. And now Belarusia is sitting back saying, hey, we're going to help you take Ukraine, Russia. Would you help us take Moldova? I mean, Moldova's next. They're going to sit there and say Russians and Belarusians are going to go into Moldova and they're going to take Moldova. And then there's going to be real issues with that whole situation there.
Hey, Chris, you brought that up, and I love to hear from both you and Sasha. I also had heard in different news reports and different other things that one of the things that we are targeting is the oligarchs and apparently targeting their yachts. So I was wondering, is this actually an effective strategy to be targeting the yachts of these super wealthy? Because apparently that's part of what our strategy is to target their yachts off of the seas of Russia.
So, Sasha, I don't want to take your time. Did you want to go ahead?
Well, the taking oligarchs' yachts, it's not the most important thing what's happening. However, it's interesting twist sometimes. In Spain, just 2 days ago, there was a court case was heard. Apparently, there was a yacht worth $7 million of one of the Russian oligarchs, and there was a Ukrainian man living in Spain by the name, I believe, Nikola Demenchuk, and he was one who was maintaining and take care of the yacht. So a few days ago, he released all Klaxon and the yacht went down and drowned. So he was arrested. He was brought to court. The judge asked 3 questions. Question number 1, what was the value of the yacht? So the man says $7 million. He says, who was the owner of the yacht? He says, the Russian oligarch by the name such and such. I was the maintenance man. Question number 3, did you drown the yacht? He says, yes. You are free to go. The end of story.
End of story. That makes a lot of sense and everything. The end of story.
I have a prediction what's going to happen on this thing.
What's your prediction?
Here's my call. Okay, Zelensky is going to fold. What's going to happen is he's going to get a meeting with Putin or his advisors. They're going to come to an agreement. You remove your troops. Ukraine will be a, quote, neutral state. And then the U.S. and the West are going to be upset still with them. And so that some of the stuff will drag on, but there'll be some sort of agreement that will take place, but it'll be more of agreement toward Ukraine being a neutral state, and Zelensky is going to fold. And the only question is, when is all that going to take place? It's not if, it's really when.
You said he's going to fold and everything. I've actually got a question for Chris based on Mr. Leon. It'll be on was on LA Bachelor show yesterday and will be on our show apparently on Tuesday, according to what Steve just said and everything. But he was actually of the opinion that should the Ukraine stay free, and I know that that's something that Sasha and a lot of the world is definitely rooting for and hoping for and everything of that nature, that there are no chances of it making it into NATO. And part of that is because of some countries, including one that I know that you're a big fan of, that would veto them entering NATO or any kind of European Union, that being France and Turkey. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that and if he has a point.
Well, you got to remember that France remembers Nazi Germany, and France remembers the Holocaust, and there were Holocaust, there were death camps in Ukraine, and that, look, that's the 1940s. The United States kind of forgets that stuff, but Europe doesn't forget. So I think that's part of the reason why they're going to go against that. But and that's important from that standpoint. But Nick, to your point,
yeah,
Zelensky's already said that. He's already said to Putin, "Look, we'll go neutral. And Putin has said, "Yeah, okay, but while we're having these discussions and negotiations, I'm going to move my troops up." That's exactly, and this is exactly what happened during the Vietnam peace talks. This is, exactly. And you know what stopped it? Bombing North Vietnam. Nixon went in there with Thunderbolt 1, Thunderbolt 2, whatever it was called. And he bombed the living bejeebers out of them. And then he stopped the bombing. They came back to the peace table and they said, screw you. And he went back in and bombed the crap out of them again and kept bombing until they came to the peace tables and made peace. Yeah. So I think,
Well, I mean, see, that was then and this is now. The real question is Putin going to have the will to have? Because I think his army's going to be taking a terrible beating
Oh,
in
yeah.
Ukraine.
Oh,
In other words, the thing is he going to be? He's going to have a lot of explaining to do? I believe, like if you took the nuclear thing out of this equation, Putin would just have his rear handed to him by the Ukrainians. I don't know if Sasha agrees with me, but that's
No, I
what
think
I'm.
that's
You know what I
oh,
would suggest?
Ukraine's
I would
strong.
I would suggest as much as nuclear war is as close to us as possible. Forget about this Cuban missile
Yeah,
crisis. It's nothing.
right.
What's happening now is much more dangerous,
Sure.
and it even it has all appearances to go a certain way where both sides, Russia and NATO with US, they cannot deviate. It's going a certain way. There is certain destination where you cannot move right or left, and you
Yeah.
can go straight the line, a little bit faster, a little bit slower. That's possibility, but
Right.
there is no way to make a turn.
Mhm.
Now,
yeah, that
on
makes
the
sense.
other hand, I want to make one very practical suggestion for all of us. I remember I was at the time, it was 10 years ago or so, I was in Moscow, and I had a friend of mine from Toronto. He was also in Moscow at the time. So we had saunas and we had drinks and dinner and so on. Then they started talking. He told me that he regrets that life goes on, and he has children and grandchildren, and very soon obviously he will expire, and
Right.
uh, he hate even to think about it, but it's always in his mind. He's in a bad mood all the time and so on. And I told him, oh, you know what, my situation is exactly the same.
Yeah, I'm there with you,
but,
Sasha.
but I want to tell you something interesting is uh, people's life is about, on average, say 30,000 days. Now the death will happen only in one day. It's not in 2 days or 5 days. One day. One day you are alive, and then something happens and you are no longer alive.
Yeah.
So why would you worry almost 30,000 days about something what will happen only in one day? So all the rest of your days, just be happy, do whatever you want to do, enjoy yourself. And that one day will just come sooner or later. Hopefully
Yeah.
later, maybe
No,
sooner. But
no, that
there
makes
is no sense to worry about it. So this is exactly what about nuclear war. I mean, it's not going to happen twice. It will happen only once. So why would you worry about something what will or will not, in fact, happened only once? Just forget about it. Just live normal life.
Yeah.
The only thing I would forget about the stuff like green energy, high-speed railway
Real.
for those who do.
Well, actually, you say to forget about it, but an extra interesting theory that I heard, of course, if it's going to happen like tomorrow or next week or in the next year and everything, it's a moot point. But if we can buy time, I've heard some people, including Mr. Leon, say that that because I was teasing him about my nephews and the fact that I would like them to make it to my age or to their my dad, their granddad's age and all of that, 60s, 70s, 80s, somewhere around that time and all of that. And Mr. Leon suggested that maybe they learn how to swim because that might be what our next thing is. If we have a nuclear war, we might all have to go down to the Atlantis kind of living and all of that. That was his idea.
I-
Maybe we got to look at a new way to live if nuclear war takes place.
Yeah.
Also, don't forget there could be, like in case of COVID, there could be some kind of the herd immunity to radiation developed. Some people, actually, I have information that Putin has incredible facilities in case of nuclear war, where he has a swimming pool and tennis court and dining rooms and all kind of facilities. And there is a lineup of people who want to serve there. And so it appears to me that well, some people will die, that's for sure.
You
But
know,
Yeah.
I think it's,
let's go back. Let's go back real quick to the sanctions. I think, and let's talk about the U.S. Reaction to the sanctions. And I think that this is getting out of hand. It's getting way more stupid than I ever thought that U.S. would be. they are pouring out Russian vodka in bars. And I think that is the dumbest thing. I used to work for the alcohol industry, and the amount of money that they're pouring down the drain is ridiculous. I think that if they wanted to do something, what they should have done was say, look, we're going to sell this Russian vodka to the highest bidder or whatever it is, and that money will go to, helping the Ukraine. Pouring it down the drain does nothing. And let me tell you something. Apple says we're not going to sell any more to Russia. We're not going to do that anymore. Guess what? By not doing that, hey, good for you, Apple. You're really way to go. But the bottom line is that the Chinese are sitting back going, hey, guess what? Apple's out of the market. Guess what our market is now? Russia. So they're going because they have nothing to do with the sanctions.
No, and Chris, that was their next move. They actually said that it was an article that I read that they said that depending on what China does with Taiwan, Apple may get out of China as well. So they've already pulled out of Russia, and now they're thinking about pulling out of China. Which I think is like you. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Yep. And all along those lines. Sasha, I did have a quick question for you. Folks have asked me, and I know the whole thing about state media and what we get from state media of Russia and all of that. But there have been, one of the things, and Chris mentioned Vietnam, one of the things that got us out of the Vietnam War was the rise of the public noise and the public anger. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. The public's anger at the whole Vietnam War, and there was a lots of protests and things of that nature. And supposedly there's those kind of protests going in Russia as well. But we're also hearing, and we know that a lot of these figures can be very much inaccurate, that like he is approved by like 90 to 95% of his people. So, you're launching a war that is not popular. I'm finding that hard to believe, but I was just wondering your thoughts about these numbers. And is there a possibility that he does have a large population that does agree with some of what he's doing and things along those lines, even if it's not 95%, let's just say it's 70%, but because we do know the numbers can be corrupted. But is there a base of people in Russia that are satisfied with Mr. Putin?
It's not the numbers what's important, because even Putin's support could be maybe only 10% instead of 85. But it doesn't matter, because if it's 10%, completely control all situation inside the country, including media sources and everything else, that 10% can easily control the country like Russia. But you see, what's happened is that you talk about Putin, Russia, Kremlin, you're talking about all that like about a normal man, normal people, normal country. Sorry, it is not. For reasons that it would be, how much time do we have? Well, we have about 25 minutes, but I'm not intending to spend 25 minutes like that. But you have to understand that Putin, he has two faces. One is a KGB, a very methodical, very thorough, very logical man. And his second face is Ayatollah, who is indoctrinated with certain beliefs. And it's like some people who believe that the earth is flat, and it doesn't matter how you will try to explain to him, he will believe, and he'll die believing that the earth is flat. So Putin, a while ago, around 2005, he's come into influence of some people who have, you could call it some patriotic wing of Russian politicians. They're not even politicians per se. One is a well-known writer by the name Prokhanov. But even more importantly, there is a philosopher, Mr. Dugin, and I've mentioned that name a few times. I even discussed it with Gary Kasparov a few years ago, and Kasparov thought that, well, I heard about him, but it's not non-event. Not so, not so. It's very seldom that I disagree with Gary Kasparov with this one, and I think he already knows the truth. Mr. Dugin is a philosopher, scientist. He speaks several languages very fluently. He's historian, and he is a person who uh, uh, some concept actually he developed and advanced, and one of the concept is the fight between the so-called sea culture, sea countries, primarily U.S., England, and the land countries. It's USSR at the time, but then Russia and China. And he was even trying to prove that the Germany should be in a land base camp because the actually U.S. and England are trying um, to overrun sooner or later Germany or so on. Okay, that's debatable, and he actually mentioned that a few times, but he did not advance that. But obviously, Russia and China, that's for sure. So it's a war that will go for centuries until someone finally will prevail. And Putin, who obviously is a very healthy man, he will live for a long time, perhaps, but he understands that his life is not endless. So he wants to be one who will implement all this theories of Mr. Dugin. In fact, what really happened is that the Dugin, Khanov, and the people in that camp, they existed in Russia even in times of Soviet Union in 70s and 80s, but they didn't have any influence. They were outsiders as communist parties concerned and so on. So they were trying to get their views around, but they were not that successful. Now, once Russia became much weaker and Soviet Union has been deposed, and, that's another interesting question how that happened. However, in the 90s, when Yeltsin was still in power, this group started to get more and more influential. At the same time, there was a rise of so-called St. Petersburg's group. It's Putin himself with all oligarchs. If you look at his close circle, they're 99% all from St. Petersburg. So these two groups, they were the Putin's group rose to power, and the other group was around, but their views started to get a little bit more and more popular. And finally, around 2005, when Putin was already in power, he just squashed Khodorkovsky and Yukos. So his power got immensely bigger and bigger. And then somebody introduced him to the teachings of Mr. Dugin. And Putin was quite impressed. And there was, from that point on, it was almost like a united, like a fusion between these two groups, the Petersburg group, who was in power, and this nationalistic group headed by Mr. Dugin, Mr. Prokhanov, and others. So now it was a transformation, complete transformation from Putin, KGB, logical man, thorough man, the normal man, so to speak, into the Ayatollah. Because all these teachings, it's like a religion. It has nothing to do with reality. But once you indoctrinate and you start to believe it, now Putin, he no longer even needs Mr. Dugin anymore because Putin went much farther than Dugin would suggest. Would never suggest to attack Ukraine and using the cluster bombs or anything like that. Dugin was not a military man. Professor Dugin was a historian. He was a scientist. And his theory could be 100% wrong, but he would never suggest doing what Putin was doing now. So right now, Putin has been transformed. All his inner circle has been transformed. And all the people who follow him, they are all no longer normal people. There is nothing to negotiate. There is no one to negotiate. And since Putin understands that he cannot leave Ukraine alone, just as what's happened so far, he has to, regardless of cost, he has to prevail, and that means destruction, complete destruction of Ukraine, the destruction of every city, every building, every house, door to door, kill as many Ukrainians as possible. So it's right now what's happening is a genocide of Ukrainian people, open, and well, the U.S. and the West did a fantastic job with sanctions. Should they do more? What I think, what they've done with sanctions is equal probably 10 nuclear thermonuclear bombs. I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no
But
doubt.
they have ability to do more, Sasha, which is one reason I think they should do the energy sanctions. I see no reason why we should import Russian oil. I mean,
but
um,
wasn't yesterday decided that the U.S. stops all imports?
yeah, I know they're moving toward that direction,
Yeah.
but I think I didn't know if that was formally approved. I heard them talking about it, but the thing is, the sanctions and the seizure and the isolation of Russia and basically crippling their economy is something that we really need to do. I mean, there's just no question about it, and we also need to support the Ukrainians. Hey, listen, remember in Afghanistan, how well did Russia do in Afghanistan? Not too well. Then what happens is the Russian people got tired of the body bags coming back from Afghanistan. Frankly, we did a much better job. I was very impressed to see the United States had very, very few people. Shoot, more people will die of COVID-19 this week than died in the entire war in Afghanistan. It was not even close.
But there are some Nick, very interesting numbers. So
I'm going to put
in
my
just
agenda on this
COVID-19. A
'cause
little over a week of fighting in Ukraine,
right.
Russians lost half of all the people they lost in Afghanistan in 9 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The thing is, they're going to, they're going to see themselves take a hit. Now, on COVID-19, yesterday, 1882 people died of COVID-19. Disingenuousness of our media. I have a real hard time trying to find out what's really going on in Ukraine because you got to wade through the agenda.
You got to wade through all kinds of stuff.
This is how many people died. By the way, this would be annualized, Chris. Okay, it's obviously the number's gone down since yesterday, and our government says, "Hey, it's okay." So this atomic bomb, what's it going to kill? 50 million? Who cares?
There's a couple of things from a data analytical point of view.
Still have
let me throw this out.
People.
It's 7-day averaging, Nick. It's 7-day averaging.
And no, actually, this is a daily thing.
There is a daily. Okay, so because they've reported here,
I did see the 7 day. The 7 days were in the 2000. The daily was at 1882. Annualized, it'd be 686,000. And our government says it's over. And it ain't.
No, it's not over. We still got a long ways to go until it's over. I don't know
our media says it's over.
One quick question. Wait a second. All these numbers, a couple thousand people here and there. But why are these people dying from COVID? Maybe they were unvaccinated. Maybe they were vaccinated, but they were not.
And then they have a vaccinated
condition, and maybe they didn't wear masks. Maybe they didn't hold distance or so on.
Yeah.
So, what that statistic really telling us? That people are ignorant. That people are not taking good care of themselves.
What it really tells us, the U.S. really doesn't give a rat's for how many people die. I don't think Putin gets this. That he thinks if you think Putin's nutty, this country's nutty. And if you said 50 million people die and we have to engage in a nuclear war, we just shrug our shoulders and point the bombs. Remember, we only have to knock out 2 cities. They have Moscow and Leningrad. That's really it. Okay, they got to knock out a huge amount of cities here.
Yeah, they got to knock out Chicago, New York, Atlanta,
we got
Los
Chicago,
Angeles,
New York, Atlanta,
Dallas, a bunch of cities. There's a bunch of cities. But I do have a question, and it comes back to.
We just need to key on 2 cities.
But I do have a question that comes back to the whole Ukraine and Russian situation. What do y'all think? Because you just mentioned the media. When a sitting U.S. senator, and I get where he's coming from, but he's basically said, let's have an explicit call for the assassination of Putin, because apparently that's what Lindsey Graham did on the Sean Hannity program. He declared that the only way to end the escalating crisis was if Putin's political allies killed the Russian dictator, and he also used the examples of Julius Caesar and Adolf Hitler in 1944.
Okay, I think he's wrong because it's not Putin. It's what Sasha pointed out. It's Putin's circle. In other words, the thing is, if you took out Hitler, you still have to deal with Goebbels. You had to deal with, the guy who's the head of the Luftwaffe. I mean, you had a huge circle you had to deal with. And so killing one person is not going to solve the problem. You're dealing with the Putin circle. And I agree with Sasha also. You're dealing with the St. Petersburg group. So to knock out one person, it'll be like, hey, I knocked off the quarterback. Yeah, the quarterback's good, Tom Brady, but then there'll be the next man up. What you need to do is a full court press on all of them. Because that's the only way you're going to take them out. Taking out one guy ain't going to waste the time.
So that was an idea about controlling sky over the Ukraine, making no-fly zone, essentially.
Yeah,
but the West should not do that.
I agree.
Simply because it would give Putin
an
excuse exactly to start war against NATO and US and never mind Baltic states and all this.
Oddly enough, you have to mobilize what they call world public opinion, because remember, if the United States just put sanctions, but the Western Europe said no, we're not.
No, Nick, it's not the case. Europe is putting sanctions.
I know that, but see, that's what you need. Today, warfare. You also have to engage the public opinion. In other words, you got to get the other countries on your side.
And why is that, Nick?
Why is that?
Because of the media. It's because of the media. Let me tell you something. In 1944, on June the 6th, 1944, if the media would have been sitting in Normandy, Hitler would own Europe and Britain and the United States, because those would have been satellited back, the dead on that beach, and people would have sat there and said, "Oh my God, what are we doing? Look at our people. They're dying. They're on the beach. They're
what are we doing here in this European?
So let's get out of there. Let's all move out of there." So we didn't do that, and all of a sudden we just
also, Chris, I saw how the Russian media twisted it. They said the vast majority of the world support Putin, and they added in the United Nations. Listen how they did it. They added China and India supporting Putin. Well, China and India both abstained in the UN vote. But what they did is they took the abstention and they moved it over to be a support for Putin. It wasn't. But see, mobilizing world public opinion, you can't underestimate the power of the media and doing that, because if the United States just imposed sanction and Western Europe said, NATO goes, we're not going to do it because, frankly, we're the guys who are going to bear the brunt of the atomic weapons. We're not even sure if Russia has a capacity of hitting the U.S. They may hit Newfoundland, or they may hit, who knows what they're going to hit. They may hit the middle of Kansas. They may miss everything here. Okay, but Western Europe is the one that's the front lines here on this.
Oh, they're totally in the front lines.
But you have to have the support of the world. And the thing is, once you get the world support, then he's in trouble. Xi Jinping could end this automatically, I believe, because if he goes, hey, look, I'm not going to support this, or I'm going to broker this, I think Putin's going to listen to the Chinese, because the Chinese are the only, it may be his only trading partner.
I don't trust,
and they're not going to be able to blow up
less than I trust France. You know that?
Wait a minute. Hold on a second, Chris.
Wait. Chris, we're a media company, so keep going.
But hold on a second. But I do have a question for Chris, because the media has come out twice and brought up two interesting things, one on the left and one on the right, if we want to talk the division of politics and everything. So apparently the media has come out and talked about Nancy Pelosi's husband's new batch of investments, which includes $2.9 million worth of, I guess, Apple stock or something along those lines. And then we've also got the media coming out talking about DeSantis and what he's got going on in Florida with this 15-week abortion ban. So I guess in some cases the media might actually present some information that might be valuable, because it sounds to me like in both of those cases that would be valuable information.
Yeah, but Mark, let's talk about Cory Booker. Let's talk about Cory Booker. He has stock in the Russian search engine. Has he dumped that stock? Cory Booker has stock in a Russian search engine.
Oh, he wants
big time stock. So did he dump it or not? No. See, they're not covering that. They're covering, let's talk about DeSantis. Let's talk about Pelosi. Let's talk about,
come on, Chris, have you ever been to a board meeting? The chair that sets the board agenda sets what you're going to discuss. Now let's take a look at the media. The media, which is 5 companies controlling 90% of the U.S. media, seriously, including everything you read, see, hear, and touch.
Yes,
okay? They set the agenda on what you're going to discuss. Okay. And so the thing is, if their agenda is Russia, their agenda is Russia. These numbers that I'm showing, the death of COVID, the annualized death in COVID, the media has moved on because apparently this is not a popular or an interesting subject anymore.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's not real. Okay,
Right.
tell me that this isn't real. This is like equal to heart disease. It is real. But
Yes.
here's the problem. The media goes, well, it's not as interesting as what Sasha's discussing, which is World War III and thermonuclear war. Because if you discuss that, wow, your ratings go way up. So when Sasha goes, hey, there could be World War III, what are you going to do when the bombs hit? Where are you going to go? That's interesting. So the media wants to jump on this Ukraine or a bunch of people dying in Ukraine. But the media really sets the agenda, and the media is what I believe Putin is very sensitive to also as well. That's the reason he was on 60 Minutes, because he realizes, and these sanctions, I agree with Sasha also, they're hurting because remember that St. Petersburg group? They live really well. Okay, at least what I saw, the Putin Circle, the St. Petersburg group. Okay, now you're hurting their lifestyle. I mean, did you see that boat that they took? That was a huge mega yacht. I saw one parked. I think I saw it parked in Venice when I was there.
Yeah,
that really hurts.
Let me tell you a quick story about U.S. Steel. So U.S. Steel was based in Pittsburgh. In fact, they built a steel building. It was a big gigantic deal, right? And at the top of the building, the U.S. Steel building, there was a conference room. And I don't know.
They have a nice restaurant up there too.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it's really, so they had the boardroom up there. Everything was good to go. And every morning they would come into the boardroom and they would have this beautiful silver tea set and they would have bagels and whatever else. And they would all have their names put on the cups and all that stuff. Well, pretty soon U.S. Steel was going down the tubes, right? Mm-hmm. But they still had their silver tea set and their bagels and their whatever else. And all of a sudden, one day they walked in, they didn't have their silver tea set. And they said, what happened? They said, U.S. Steel's gone. It's done. Well, when did this happen? So all of a sudden, I think maybe you're right, Nick and Sasha, that it will hit when it hits them, when it finally hits them. That's going to be, oh my God.
That has changed. Believe it or not, the thing is they adopt a lifestyle. At least this has been my experience hanging around these people. And the worst thing in the world you can do, ever, it's not death, is take that lifestyle away from them. So the minute they seize that yacht, I was going like, they start confiscating their assets, limiting their travel. They can't go to the, what do they call it, that French laundry restaurant, the French laundry restaurant. And they can't stay in 5-star hotels anymore. I mean, you're starting to really hurt their lifestyle. Nick, you're going to effectuate change.
Yeah, speaking really quickly, because you just mentioned it as something I was going to bring up earlier. And all of that, when you talked, Chris, about U.S. Steel and everything, one of the other things that the president has talked about, and I know that it's separate from what's going on in the Ukraine, is the whole notion of $15 minimum wage and also supporting the unions. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris was just here, meaning here being Durham, North Carolina, like 2 days ago. And that's one of the things that she was touting, was the need to support our unions and to support this $15 a wage increase. So I'm just wondering, from all of our esteemed panel, do the unions have any life? And is there any possibility that this will happen, that we will see these kind of wages going up? And should we be concerned, or are we all about to be blown up and it doesn't matter because nobody's going to be getting paid anything?
Well, here's the thing I think about unions and the whole issue in general. You're talking about pawns in the chess game, Mark. Okay, in other words, and Sasha would probably agree with me. We were talking about the masses. They're pawns in the chess game. Are they important? Sure. Do you sacrifice them? Yes, you do, believe it or not. So the thing is, unfortunately, the vast majority of the population here in Ukraine and in Russia are just pawns in the big game, but they're not the king, queen, bishop, rooks, etc. So the thing is, if you're going to effectuate change, you really have to look at the major pieces, not the minor pieces. I know it's more exciting because there's more pawns on the board, right, Sasha, than there are rooks. But what's more powerful? It's the rook or the queen.
I'm going to go work for Target. Their starting salary is $24 an hour. $24 an hour.
Frankly, it's totally irrelevant to the world economy. It's totally irrelevant. Yeah. Whatever Kamala Harris does, it makes people feel good. Yay, and the Democrats all clap. But what she's doing is she's saying, hey, my pawns are important. Yeah, they're important. But the thing is, they're not going to effectuate change. It's going to be the major pieces, which unfortunately is not the pawns that she's discussing. Now, when it comes to the high-speed rail, should we have it? Yeah, we should have had it a long time ago. When I go to Europe, I love getting on the high-speed rail in Italy and they're better than our stupid trains. I won't take ours because they're junk, you know. And somewhere, but I agree with who said that they're going to be doing studies. I was behind the scenes. Maybe it was feasibility
Sasha.
study. I totally agree that what happens in Washington D.C. and David Walker will probably agree with me also on this. That where the money's going to go, it will not. They're not going to build any rails. What they're going to do is pay lawyers like myself, or they're going to pay engineers to do feasibility studies on all this stuff, and they'll spend millions and millions of dollars, if not billions and billions of dollars on feasibility studies, and they won't build one thing. And
now we know where the network gets its money. Now we know where the network gets its money from, since Nick is a lawyer and Kim is an engineer. Now we know
exactly. Well, hey, you know what we're going to do, Mark? We're going to wait to get our feasibility study on the media, and we'll make more money off of that than we will.
I mean, the cancer moonshot. The cancer moonshot is a perfect example of this. Mark, is that Biden said we're going to have this cancer moonshot. $4 million. $4 million went to salaries of the board of the Cancer Moonshot. Yeah. Less money went to research than went to salaries.
Yeah.
So,
when I was at the city attorney's office in Miami Beach, I was a clerk, and they asked me to audit the Miami Beach South Shore Redevelopment Agency. We had it because South Beach was a complete blight. Mm-hmm. And I came back and I said, look, all the money is accounted for, but I told Bob Ritter, who was the city attorney, I said, we spent $1 million back then, which was a lot of money, on feasibility studies and attorney's fees, but not one shovel has hit the ground yet. And he goes, Nick, now you know how you're going to make money when you're a lawyer. Okay, they're going, like, are you kidding me? So one problem that we have, and this is Democrats and Republicans combined, they're bipartisan in this. They'll take the money that's meant for high-speed rail, feed it to all their law firms and their engineering friends that donated to them so they can get in office to do feasibility studies, and you ain't going to see one rail in the United States.
No, we won't see one rail. Speaking of not seeing one rail, it's almost
absolutely. And so when China and these people say, hey, the U.S. is corrupt, duh. It's just we're not as corrupt as China and Russia. That's all.
Well, corruption's all over the world.
But we're not as good as Denmark and Finland.
We're going to talk some more about this on Monday and continue these conversations. It's almost time for us to wrap up, as me and Sasha have to bounce over to his show and everything. But I was going to say along those lines, and Nick, you can take us on out of here and everything, we've also seen a major case. It's just one last thing that I was going to mention, where the Supreme Court has reinstated the death penalty for the convicted Boston Marathon bomber. So they did it by a 6-3 vote earlier today, and they agreed with the Biden administration's argument that the federal appeals court was wrong to throw out the sentence of death a jury imposed on.
This from a pro-life president. Thought I'd throw this from a pro-life president. Just thought I'd throw that out.
That was a Supreme Court decision, from my understanding.
It was the Supreme Court decision, and like I said, but the Biden administration was making the argument, so you may have a point. And by the way, me and you, Chris, will have to talk about Mr. Corey Glover at some point. I actually have some family ties and some family connections to them, and it's maybe not as favorable as you may think. Because, like I said, there were definitely some people that were thinking that he was not and will not be a good presidential candidate because of not being a very forthright person. I'll just put it that way on some things in terms of his viewpoints and things along those lines. But we can have a off the air or maybe even on the air conversation about that later on.
Okay, well, we'll wrap up and I guess see everybody next week.
Except for you want people to go at 11 o'clock next door.
Yeah, you're going to be moving.
They can catch
next door. Yeah, go next door. All right, we'll see everybody at 11. See you next week. Bye-bye.